come in. Hold on a second. Oh, hey, yeah, so I was touching up a few spots down there. Apparently Michelangelo missed a few spots when he was painting it, and I figured I could make it better. Well, anyway, hey guys, welcome to the Sistine Chapel. Today, in our notes, we're going to talk about Renaissance art. And Renaissance art has a lot to do with, you guessed, humanism. The Sistine Chapel is one of the most famous works of Renaissance art. And Michelangelo was the painter of the Sistine Chapel. And he was asked by the Pope to paint the chapel. And as you can see, there's various biblical scenes all over the chapel. All right, scenes from the Bible. Now, you might be wondering, how did Michelangelo paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel? Well, he was actually on scaffolding like I am, really high above the floor. I don't know how far that is, but I don't want to fall. And he had to lay on his back, really high up in the air, and paint the ceiling. Now, there's some really interesting parts of the ceiling that I want to show you. For instance, one of them is figure on the left and the right. The figure on the right is zoomed in, but you can see there's two little angels looking over Zechariah, who's modeled after Pope Julius II. Anyway, these two angels are looking over the prophet Zechariah's shoulder. If you can see on the right, there's a gesture that the small angel is making with his hand around his homie there. It's called making the fig, and in Italian, it's the equivalent of flipping somebody off, giving them the middle finger, right? Why would Michelangelo paint this? Well, some people say it was because Pope Julius II, also known as like Pope Julius the Terrible, was really, really corrupt, and Michelangelo wanted to make a statement and flip off the Pope. And he was making a gamble that the Pope would never see it, and he was right, because in order to see it, you have to be standing on the ground looking straight up, and you know, that's a really high distance, so there's probably not any way that you would even notice that. So anyway, kind of interesting, right? Michelangelo is flipping off the Pope. Well, guys, I hope this has been really interesting for you. It's time to start getting in the notes and to really start learning about Renaissance art. I'm going to have to find my way down here. I think if I just come, I'm okay. I'm okay. Oh, guys. Oh, I'm all right. I promise. Don't call the paramedics. I'll be fine. I just fell from a really high place. As I told you, the cringe was intense on that video ahead of time, so I warned you. But no, if you're wondering, I did not fall off the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. If I did, I would not be talking to you right now. I'd be dead because it's really, really high up in the air. Well, anyway, hope you enjoyed my amazing green screening capabilities to give you a little intro into the Renaissance art. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Essential question 2.2, what were the characteristics of Renaissance art? Well, I'll give you a hint. It has to do with humanism, but you probably knew that already. Anyway, though, pause if you need to, and let's talk about Renaissance art. Okay, anyway. All right, so Renaissance art. Before we talk about the art itself, let's talk about patrons of the arts. So, what is a patron? Well, guys, here's the deal. I told you there's a lot of wealthy people that are running the cities of Italy, especially in Florence. So, wealthy, influential people like popes, some royalty, but mostly it's like popes and wealthy merchants and wealthy bankers and people like that. They are the ones that patronize or pay the artists for their work. Now, there's this explosion of art throughout Europe, and you have to ask yourself, how can people afford to do that? Well, wealthy people are paying a lot of money for these people to do all these paintings and for Renaissance humanists to write all the things that they're writing. And guys, having an artwork from a Renaissance artist was kind of a symbol of status. If you walked into the Vatican, which is, the church in Rome where the Pope lives. I've been there, guys. If you walk in there, it's covered with priceless works of art from Renaissance paintings, Renaissance artists. Why? Because popes patronized them. They said, "Hey, we want to pay you to come paint the Sistine Chapel or paint a portrait or whatever." So it was very much a status symbol. If you had like a Michelangelo painting in your home, if you were like a wealthy banker and you were like, "Look, I've got a Michelangelo painting," it was kind of like a cool thing. And you know what? Today it is too. If you have an original work of art, number one, it should be in a museum and you're probably in serious trouble. But number two, it would be a very high status symbol. Look, I've got a Da Vinci drawing hanging on my wall. Anyway, so yeah. Now, often, here's what's really interesting. A lot of times, patrons would tell the artist, "Hey, you know what? I want you to paint a painting of Jesus' birth, but I want you to paint me as one of the wise men." I'm not lying, guys. There were times literally where patrons would say, "Paint me into the painting." Okay? Or maybe artists, to show respect for their patrons, painted them into the painting of some holy scene. So when you see paintings, guys, you're going to actually see a lot of the people in the paintings are famous people like the de Medici family or someone like that. And it was like a symbol of status. And it also made you kind of look like you were holy, like, "Look at me. I'm at the birth of Jesus." Now, nobody really thought you were there at the birth of Jesus, but you are associating yourself with holiness. "Look at me. I'm in this painting here with Jesus," right? Now, let's talk about new sources of art. Okay, now, when we talked about medieval art and medieval culture, guess where it all came from? It all came from the church. Remember the other day in class, we talked about medieval art, what it looked like, and basically, the only reason to do art in the medieval period was to draw or paint a battle, that happened in France or England or somewhere like that, or also to paint something to glorify God. That's why most of the paintings from the medieval period are something religious, something to do with God. Now, it's not that Renaissance paintings aren't religious. Oh, they are. But the idea comes from the church. Everything was done for the glory of God. But we learned in the last chapter, because of all the crises like the Great Schism, where you had 2, 3 popes, or the 100 Years' War, or the bubonic plague, which is still going on in the Renaissance, but all of these crises weakened the power of the Catholic Church. And it also weakened its influence. So it's interesting. Renaissance art and culture doesn't come from the church down, it comes from the laity. Now, laity, guys, is just a word to kind of mean the people at the bottom, like, not priests and Catholics, but the people that actually go to church. Lay people, everyday, average, uneducated people. Well, maybe not uneducated, because humanism does push that everybody should be educated, but the people at the bottom, not the church, everyday, ordinary people. Maybe not the people at the bottom like peasants, because let's be real, peasants aren't painting things. But lay people means not church people, ordinary people. Okay? So Renaissance art are going to be painted from ordinary people, not from the church down. So pause if you need to. That black coffee, guys, just hits different. No cream, no sugar, straight black. Pause if you need to. All right, now, new techniques. Well, I showed you some examples of medieval paintings, and you guys should notice that they were kind of boring and flat and not three-dimensional. So guess what they're going to learn to do in the Renaissance? They're going to learn to do all kinds of techniques. But first and foremost, Renaissance art embraced a lot of different things. The natural world. So they paint things the way they saw it, people the way they saw them. They made paintings that expressed human emotions. Basically, they're not just painting baby Jesus that looks like a 30-year-old balding man with the Virgin Mary, which is what medieval paintings were. Madonna with child, Madonna and child, right? And everything looks kind of the same. They're moving beyond just religious subjects, and they're painting natural subjects, nature, art, or nature, humans, things like that, okay? So it gets a lot more broad on the kind of subjects that they paint. Another thing you're going to see is oil paints, which were kind of rare in the medieval period, are going to become a lot more common. So most of the art that you see in the Renaissance is oil paintings. You'll see when we start studying the art in the class, you'll see the title of the art, and then you'll see what medium it was made out of, which is oil, and you'll see what kind of medium it was painted on, which is canvas usually. So you'll see oil on canvas, which means oil paintings on a painting canvas, right? Now, painters are going to use a new technique, all right? Chiaroscuro, which is shading, all right? It's actually chiaroscuro, not chiaroscuro, chiaroscuro, which is shading. So what does that word mean, guys? It means shading your art in order to make things look more natural and three-dimensional. If you've ever been in an art class and you've kind of scribbled in and put your finger on the art in a pencil and you move your finger around and you let all those oils mix in, you're going to shade and you're going to drag some of that that lead or that graphite all over the place and you can shade things, right? What does shading do? It makes things three-dimensional. Remember how flat all the medieval paintings were? Well, in the Renaissance, it's all going to be more three-dimensional. Also, painters are going to paint with what's called linear perspective. I'm going to show you what that means on the next several slides when we learn about different works of art. But basically, it's where you make things three-dimensional. You make things in the painting in the background look like they're way back in the background. And you make certain things in your painting look like they're in the foreground. So you differentiate between background and foreground, and you make three-dimensional paintings. So one of the things you're going to see about the Renaissance is because of shading and linear perspective, they're going to be three-dimensional. It's not just going to be flat. All right? Now, yeah, Renaissance were no longer flat like medieval paintings. Okay? So, without further ado, let's dive in to some of this Renaissance art. So when we do this, guys, I want you to write the names in your notes of the artwork, who made it, and I want you to tell me what the characteristics are I'm describing that make it a Renaissance painting. Pause if you need to. All right, now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about the art, and I want you to write down what you think are the most important things that make it Renaissance art, okay? Now, one of the most famous pieces of work was made by Leonardo da Vinci, and it's called Vitruvian Man, all right? And it's basically showing you the perfect form of human beings, all right? Once again, remember I told you that human beings, according to the Renaissance artists, have like a perfect form. So one of the things that Leonardo da Vinci is kind of pointing out with this work here is that humans are symmetrical. If you draw a line down the middle of us, the right side of us is the same as the left. We are perfect, symmetrical, all right? But another thing is this. If you, as a human being, all right, put your legs in this position right here and hold your arms up at an angle, up at an angle, then wherever you touch, all right, you can make a complete, perfect circle, right? But another thing is this. Also, if you put your arms straight out and your feet straight down, then you can trace a complete, perfect square, all right, that goes from your hands over to the top of your head, and you can make a square. So look at the perfect geometrical shapes of humans according to Leonardo da Vinci. We're perfect, we're symmetrical, we can make perfect squares, perfect circles with our hands, arms, bodies, and all that stuff. So how is this a piece of Renaissance art where, I'm talking like weird. It's showing the perfect form of man, all right? Bam, there you go, some Renaissance art, 1490. All right. Mona Lisa, one of the most famous works of art, guys, the Mona Lisa. How is this Renaissance art? Well, it's painted during the Renaissance, Leonardo da Vinci, but once again, guys, you've got some three dimensions. You can see the shading on her nose and her eyes and her mouth and her neck, and once again, it makes the head and the face stand out from the body, right? And once again, guys, that is shading, right? Something that is being used in Renaissance art. I want to show you guys a picture here. Check this out. When I went to Paris, my wife and I, we were like, oh man, I want to go look at the Mona Lisa and just sit there and stare at it. And, because it's like the most famous painting in the world. And surely we can just, if you watch in the movies, like you walk right up to it and stare at it, right? Guys, here is when we went to see the Mona Lisa. All right? There's me right there, where the cursor is. All right, I had to push and shove and punch my way. I knocked a few old people down. All right, I swung on a few old people. They caught these hands, and I got my way to the front. And while I was at the front, I was getting knocked around and pushed and shoved. And it wasn't the serene, calm, contemplative experience that I was hoping for. All right, but yeah, there's the Mona Lisa and about 1 million people trying to see it at once, and they're all. I'm exaggerating, guys. Nobody was punching, but we were shouldering each other and pushing each other around, trying to get to the front. When we first got there, my wife and I were like, no way. I was like, look, I'll go first, you follow. So I like pushed my way to the front, and she took a picture of me pushing my way to the front. I'm like looking back like, hey, you want to catch these hands? Like I'm trying to fight somebody, like they're beefing with me or something? And then my wife followed. She took the picture and then she followed. So anyway, yeah, guys, Mona Lisa is a great work of Renaissance art, one of the most famous paintings in the world. It's in the Louvre, by the way, in Paris, France. All right, now, School of Athens painted by Raphael. All right, now, this, guys, is a great work of Renaissance art because it's focused on Plato. And Plato, guys, Plato, not Plato. Plato was one of the most famous philosophers to come out of ancient Greece. If you were in world history, I would elaborate. But anyway, what you see, guys, here is a school, a place of learning. Oftentimes, people would come to Plato and Socrates and Aristotle, which are some of the greatest philosophers of ancient Greece, and they would show up and learn, right? So this whole thing, School of Athens, is all about humans wanting to learn, right? And they're learning at the feet of Plato, one of the great philosophers. So once again, guys, humanism, learn as much as you can about everything. But what's really interesting about this, guys, is it's painted from what's called perspective, all right? It's three-dimensional. Do you see how these columns in the back look way further back than this column in the front? It's three-dimensional, right? It's not all just flat, okay? All of these curves and everything make it look three-dimensional. But let me tell you how perspective works, all right? I learned this back in like 7th grade art, I think. But check it out. If you draw a dot, all right, and you draw a whole bunch of lines all emanating from a dot, then you make things three-dimensional. All of these buildings all follow a direct line from this dot. All right, it's called one-point perspective, okay? Every line on top of a building or on top of a brick or on top of the street all comes straight from that one dot, and that's how you make three-dimensional images. So you might say, how is this three-dimensional? Well, check this out if I draw a dot and draw lines, right? So look at how everything, guys, all the columns, all the steps, everything, guys, kind of follows a line from a center point, which makes it three-dimensional, right? Okay, so perspective. Once again, guys, it is a Renaissance idea, perspective and shading. What else do I have here? I even forgot what I have. Michelangelo's David. Same guy that did the Sistine Chapel, guys, did a sculpture of David. David, really interesting. They had a whole bunch of people that they actually commissioned to do David before Michelangelo got a hold of it. And they had a piece of rock, because he's going to carve it out of a piece of rock. But the piece of rock wasn't, that great of a quality, but he did it anyway. And the people, when they commissioned it, thought that the statue was going to be much smaller. And when they saw it, they were like, "Holy crap!" They were going to put it on the ceiling of I forget where, but they were going to put it on a ceiling of one of their famous, places. And they found out how large it was, and they were like, "Holy crap! We can't put that in a ceiling. That needs to be, somewhere where everybody can see it." So it's actually a massive sculpture, guys, and it's David. If you know the biblical story of David fighting the giant Goliath. If you go around from his and look at the back, he's got his slingshot that he slung the rock and killed Goliath. He's got it like slung over his back. And my wife and I were also here to take this picture. And like I said, it's a very big statue. I don't know if you really get the size of how the statue is, but it's maybe 17 feet tall, something like that. It's huge. All right. And here are me and my wife taking a picture in front of it. I'm not going to lie, when I first walked up to the statue, people were painting pictures with their hands raised up in the air, and I thought it was weird. And then I realized what they were doing, and I was like, oh, yeah, they were taking inappropriate pictures with Michelangelo's David. I want you guys to know that your history teacher respected art, and he did not take inappropriate pictures with David because I respect Michelangelo, and I respect Italy. Let's go to the next one. All right, obviously, guys, the Sistine Chapel, pretty amazing. It was awe-inspiring when I went to this, guys. Painted by Michelangelo, like I said. To do the ceiling, he had to go up on scaffolding and lay on his back, and like that really would have been terrifying. And paint, like laying on his back, facing up for hours at a time, each separate panel. But basically, they tell various stories from different parts of the Bible. Like you've got, Adam and Eve being tempted by the serpent to eat the fruit. You've got creation. You've got God creating Adam right here. All right, but look, guys, at how all the humans look like. I mean, God, the God of Christians and the New Testament, Old Testament. He looks like Zeus, the Greek god, right? Why? Because once again, guys, Renaissance painters were trying to paint like the Romans and the Greeks, all right? They were very obsessed with the Romans and the Greeks. There's all kinds of cool, like, myths and things about, like I showed you, the flipping off of the Pope. But there's also, I can't remember the exact story when we went on the tour, guys, but when we walked in, we had someone tell us right before we went in, there's like a certain amount of images of skulls everywhere. And here's one back here. Some people say it's a skull. You can see where the cursor is, the eyes right here, and the mouth. All right, but Michelangelo apparently placed skulls around there. Some of them he had like cow skulls where he actually painted on there, and some people say like he was kind of putting pagan influences, non-Christian influences there, because pagans use a lot of like cows and cow skulls and things like that in their religious ceremonies. I don't know, guys. There's all kinds of myths about the Sistine Chapel, but when you walk in there, it's pretty freaking awesome. And what really sucks is you can't take pictures. And Mr. Lawhon follows the rules, so I walked in, and I kept my phone in my pocket. But I walked in, guys, and it's really crowded, and you're only allowed to be in there for 10 minutes, and they push you out of there. 10 minutes, guys. You know what? Mr. Lawhon got his freaking 10 minutes. All right? Myself and my wife, we sat there and stared at the ceiling in awe. And then 10 minutes later, we got pushed out. But, guys, amazing. All right. So anyway, guys, that's a little bit about Renaissance art. I hope that you guys can make the connections of why it is Renaissance, how it is humanist, how it connects to Greeks and Romans, and how it's different than the art that came before it. Okay? Guys, that's all I have for the notes today. I will see you Wednesday.